Hi, everyone. It's a true pleasure being here today, for many reasons. One, because I love this kind of presentation. I love talking about Montessori, but also because feminism is a topic that is very dear to me, and especially in connection to Maria Montessori, and that I became interested in the work of Maria Montessori through her feminist commitment. So many of you might know that, and that my accent in English is pretty thick, but I grew up in Italy, and for a long time, all I knew about Montessori was the image of a serene old lady blissfully watching children from a distance. Set this up, sorry. Yes, here. So most of my knowledge of Montessori came from the Mille Lire note, which you can see here, where a mature Montessori is portrayed. And to be honest, nothing in that image as a young woman captivated me. A woman looking after children was surely not uncommon in Italy in the 90s and early 2000s, and seeing someone of a certain age doing so was also not unusual, as I grew up with my grandmother mostly while my parents were working. So, as a young woman primarily interested in social sciences and gender studies, I just assumed that Montessori represented a status quo as I was handling these fields, which were, fairly very diffused in Italy. A woman watching over a group of children, how groundbreaking could that possibly be? It was only when I read a pivotal piece of scholarship, important not only in Montessori studies, but also in the studies of women's rights, that I realized that she was not only looking after children, but she was doing much more. In Una donna nuova, il femminismo scientifico di Maria Montessori, and you will see the citation in a minute, this book, which is written by Valeria Paola Babini and Luisa Lama, the two scholars argue that Montessori developed her own interpretation of the prevailing strands of feminism in Italy, which Babini and Lama term scientific feminism. This definition, which we will be unpacking today, and here the citation from the book by Luisa Lama, as well as other publications available in English, is based on the role that Montessori attributed to science and the process of women's emancipation. Eureka. After I read this book, I understood why the figure of Maria Montessori could be compelling to me. And this is how I first became interested in Montessori. And as you can see, I still keep this book that I bought 27 years ago. So Montessori was a feminist before becoming a pedagogue, before engaging in pacifism, and before dedicating herself to the spreading of her pedagogy. Therefore, I believe that the influence of feminism is foundational for her entire body of thought and cannot be underestimated. It's easy to overlook this influence as most primary sources on this topic are in Italian, and scholarship on the subject as a result continues to be primarily in this language. So here I put the books in Italian, a couple of references in English, but also another text that has come out over the past few years by Giovanna Latri that is also like a sort of a deep dive into Maria Montessori's feminism. Montessori was a feminist, both in her action as well as in the formulation of her philosophy. From a very young age, she acted as someone who believed women were not inferior to men, a view shared by many of her mentors, teachers, as well as society in general. She also wrote and spoke in favor of women's enfranchisement and emancipation. This duality, the practical and theoretical aspects of her engagement go hand in hand and must be considered together, as they're crucial to understanding an approach to inquiry that I think will shape her work over time. Let me begin with a brief introduction to Italian feminism at the end of the 19th century to illustrate how practical struggle and theoretical reflection were interconnected, shaping and reinforcing one another. So, at the turn of the 20th century, Italy saw the rise of a new form of feminism, one rooted not in direct political activism, but in social charity. Rather than demanding political rights outright, Italian Women Association focused on social activism aimed at reshaping women's roles in the public sphere. This organization sought to create structure for assistance and education primarily to support working class women and their children. The goal was to equip women with both the theoretical as well as the practical tools for facing the fight for political enfranchising. The idea was that once the political battle were won, women would be ready to experience full emancipation. At the heart of this movement was a push for social and legal equality between men and women. Motherhood, in particular, became a political tool. As Montessori herself put it, and here you have the citation, women's social victory would be a maternal one. Italian feminism was therefore built on the notion, and this is important, it was built on the notion of equivalence, the idea that women brought something distinct to the public sphere. This difference was often linked to their biological capacity to procreate, and feminists sought to use this strategically in their fight for political enfranchisement. Now, just to explain sort of like the long arc of the sort of evolution of feminist thought, an alternative approach to women's rights is based on equality, and this is much more common today. This perspective argues that all individuals, regardless of gender, sexual orientation, religion, were equally valuable and should have the same opportunity to participate in public life. But here is a citation to work a little bit more on this notion of feminism based on equivalence. And this is from Montessori. And what would it be the woman's social mission? She'll be able to do everything that a man does, but with a special touch of maternal kindness, which means loving protection for the weak, relief of all misery, the triumph of justice, and universal peace. In the meantime, she puts into practice a great civic principle, solidarity and organization. So Montessori embodies the school of thought of practical feminism. She incarnates this duality of practical and theoretical engagement as her feminism emerged from her work in the streets of Rome with the disenfranchised and evolved into theoretical reflection expressed in newspaper articles and talks. But let's take a step back to understand how she became a prominent member of the feminist movement. So from a young age, she challenged societal norms and paved the way for women's advancement. She attended a science and engineering school traditionally reserved for male students, and later became one of the first women to enroll in and graduate from medical school. Montessori's involvement in the Italian feminist movement began during her year as a medical student. Montessori's academic training was deeply influenced by the principle of so-called social medicine, a preventative approach aimed at improving the physical and psychological condition of the lower classes. Her professors and Montessori over time view medicine not just a means of treating the illnesses, but as a tool for the physical and moral and social regeneration of the young Italian nation. Montessori fully embraced this vision as a student, considering science as a way to uplift the marginalized. She believed that scientific knowledge should not remain confined to elite circles, but should be disseminated widely to prevent worsening conditions for those living on the fringes of society. Her commitment to social change was not limited to theory then. She engaged deeply in grassroots activism, volunteering in institutions such as the Asdrubali maternity ward in the Esquilino district, and advocating for for reform of juvenile detention centers. Through both her scientific inquiry and direct action, Montessori aligned herself with an activist movement that sought structural change through education, medical intervention, as well as social reform. In looking for images about Maria Montessori's social and grassroots work in Rome, I couldn't find that much. I could only find photos of sort of the neighborhoods in which she was working on. And instead, I settled here for the Kitchen for Poor Patients in Milan, created by Alessandrina Ravizza in 1905. Alessandrina Ravizza is a woman, a social activist, and a feminist based in Milan, with whom Montessori deeply collaborated at the beginning of the 20th century. So I just wanted to give you a visual, an idea of the kind of collaboration, though this one not directly. Montessori was not working specifically with this kitchen, but sort of the work being done by these women in disadvantaged neighborhoods. By applying this scientific approach to social issue, Montessori allied herself with a form of activism that sought structural change through medical intervention and, later, education. This outward-facing engagement led her to collaborate with numerous organizations dedicated to advancing women's rights, reinforcing her belief that social progress require both structural reform as well as collective action. But her engagement extended beyond direct aid, which we've just seen. In March 1896, the Associazione Femminile di Roma, the Women's Associations of Rome, was funded with the goal of fostering solidarity and sisterhood while encouraging women to pursue their feminine interests, right? When you read this 19th century, turn of the 20th century pieces, you always find feminine interest vaguely described. At the time, Montessori was elected vice secretary. The group emerged in response to both domestic and international events, particularly Italy's colonial ambitions in East Africa. Just days before the organization funding, feminist groups in Milan and Turin had protested what they called the deplorable African War. The turning point became with the Battle of Adwa of 1896, where Ethiopian forces decisively defeated the Italian army. And I just want to emphasize how deeply exceptional this event was. This is the only event in the 19th century in which an African country defeats a European country. It resonated everywhere in the press in Europe. So in the aftermath of the battle, Montessori took bold action. In her first act as vice secretary, she launched a petition demanding the end to the menacing African war. Montessori's engagement with this movement placed her among the radical feminists who openly opposed Prime Minister Francesco Crispi's colonial policies. And by taking a stand against Italy's imperial ambition, she helped shape a feminist discourse that extends beyond women's rights to encompass broader questions of peace and social justice. And as she called on the women in Africa who were doubly oppressed, not just as women, but as Black women. In addition to commenting on international politics, Montessori also addressed domestic labor issues in international forums. At the 1896, and I want to move this because I'm just realizing it might be problematic. Here I am at the International Congress in Berlin in 1896. Montessori discussion centers on peace, social reforms, women access to universities and profession, as well as labor rights. Maria Montessori addressed the issue of women's labor, highlighting both the excessively long working hours and the wage disparity between men and women for equal work, a key demand of the women's emancipation movement. Her speech at the Congress was incredibly well received, especially in Italy. It resonated everywhere, drawing attention for both the attendees as well as the press. Montessori's key point in this speech was advocating for pay equity. In 1899, at the 1899 Congress of the International Council of Women, Montessori revisited the issue of women's labor, emphasizing that female workers were now present in all sectors. In the newspaper Italian Femminile, she later extensively reported on the Congress as well as on her speech. And if you're interested, you can just Google the 1899 Congress of International Council of Women, and you will find actually in English some of the, I think a couple of Montessori's writings on the topic. But here is a quotation again from an Italian newspaper where Montessori later published. The newspaper is titled Italia Femminile, Feminine Italy, and here is Montessori extensively reporting on the Congress as well as on her speech. And here are some of the main points. The first citation that I put, it's because she uses the expression new women as a sort of consciousness of the role that women were playing at the time. New women who work for social progress, who contribute to universal well-being. Quote, the female worker is poorly paid, and although she often provides half or even all of the family's bread, she remains a silent victim of her husband's brutality, just as when she was financially dependent on him. The female teacher, who holds nearly 2/3 of early childhood education in her hands, is kept at a lower position than her male counterpart. Careers are not open to her, and reforms aimed at improving the teaching profession often overlook her. The female doctor, and this is I just added because at the time she was a doctor, and the female lawyer, she's always a doctor, but I wanted to sort of express the duality of her interest in both the teachers as well as in her own profession. And the female doctor and the female lawyer encounter obstacle in social prejudice or the law, preventing them from successfully carrying out their struggle or existence. So Montessori took practical feminism in a distinctly scientific direction, developing what she called scientific feminism, or as she described it, as science as a form of feminist militancy. Second. Okay. Scientific feminism or science as a form of feminist militancy. This definition has multiple dimensions. She demonstrated women's contribution to scientific fields such as medicine, anthropology, and pedagogy, while directly challenging misogynistic theories that frame women as biologically inferior. She pointed out the widespread belief, falsely validated by science, that women were inherently and irreversibly inferior. And here is a citation from something that, again, you can find online and a reference in English just for you to sort of connect to things that you might have read. This is from Pedagogical Anthropology. Montessori writes, there is a widespread belief confirmed in the name of science that the woman is biologically, in other words, totally inferior, that the volume of her brain is condemned by nature to an inferiority against which nothing can prevail. Beyond her scientific contribution, Montessori's scientific feminism promoted scientific literacy as a tool for advancing women's status. She famously said, "My wish is for women to fall in love with scientific reasoning." As Babini, returning to my first love, to the book that I was showing you before, and Lama explain, Montessori saw rationality as a guide for women's choices, even in personal matters like marriage and motherhood, which she believed should be shaped by a consciousness illuminated by science. By equipping women with scientific fluency, Montessori aimed to strengthen their authority, both in society as well as in their own life. Montessori promoted scientific education in areas such as motherhood and sexuality, advocating a form of maternal feminism. In line with broader trends of Italian feminism that we discussed before, she maintained that women could assert their rights without abandoning traditionally ascribed roles, particularly motherhood. She emphasized that without scientific knowledge, women lack both awareness and agency, leaving them vulnerable to social and biological consequences. Conversely, as early as 1902, Montessori argued that a woman, after having gone to conquer social labor, will take a further step. She will conquer her biological labor, which is the true goal of feminism, the victory of her own children. So my question is, why don't we know that much about Montessori's feminism? Was she a feminist for a specific period of time, or was she a feminist for her whole life? Biographer Rita Kramer argued that she abandoned feminism after 1908, the year that she last attended a feminist gathering. Similarly, Valeria Paola Babini and Luisa Lama conclude their analysis of Montessori's feminism in the same year. I disagree. It's hard to say when you like a book that much, but I do. Well, I think feminism is not something that one simply adopts for a period of time and then abandons. It's a perspective, I feel. It's a way of interpreting society as well as, I think, sometimes reality. And this perspective does not imply a switch off. At least, I mean, that's my personal experience. Instead, I see those years of feminist engagement as foundational for Montessori. As historian Paola Trabalzini explained, Montessori initially viewed women and children, particularly mothers and children, as an inseparable unit, a duo, she calls it. And you have the citation of all the texts that I'm referring to in the chat. Montessori saw women's emancipation as a means to improve the well-being of children, so as a tool. I will argue that women are central in Montessori's entire conception of childhood, a framework that she developed during these years and carried with her throughout her career. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Erica. That was really great. We will now move on to Uma and Helen. And just a reminder to put any questions you might have for Erica, Uma, or Helen in the chat, and we will do our best to read them at the end of the session. So just to introduce Helen and Uma, Helen Elias holds AMI diplomas at the 3 to 6 and 6 to 12 levels. She has been working at the Montessori Training and Research Trust, or MTRT, in Hyderabad, India for the last 25 years in various capacities. Helen is deeply involved with ESF, that's Éducateurs Sans Frontières, and Community-Rooted Education, or CORE. She's currently an AMI 3 to 6 associate trainer. Our other speaker is Uma Ramani. She is the Director of Training for the 3 to 6 levels at the Montessori Institute of North Texas, or MINT, in Dallas, Texas. She spearheaded the design of the AMI blended training and piloted the AMI 3 to 6 blended course at MINT in 2019. She's deeply involved with ESF, and she designed the CORE approach for grassroots levels in early childhood education for the providers. So Uma and Helen, I'll pass this on to you.
Thank you so much, Ren, and thank you, Erica. This was it has really been eye-opening for both Helen and I to really reflect on the work that we are doing, which is, as trainers, our work is so much focused on the child. You know, we start with the child and everything stems from that. But to really analyze that further from this point of view of the impact on the women and, what the training does for them has been very eye-opening for us. So both Helen and I look forward to sharing some of these thoughts with you, because mostly in our trainings, this her Montessori's early work with women has become a footnote in the context of our discussion of her work with children. We talk about her championship of children's rights, her advocacy of education as a tool for peace. And so it was really special to be reflecting on Montessori and her work on Women's Day, and to look at her work and our work through the perspective on its impact on women. And like you, Erica, I agree with you that I think this thread of feminism carried on and informed her work throughout her life. And so I think that's something that I would love to explore further with you. Because over the 5 decades of her work with children, almost 5 decades, since 1908, when people have said that her feminism came to a stop and she went on to another tack, Montessori actually evolved her understanding of education, and she came to explain her approach to education as an aid to life. That means she came to look at it as an approach that serves all of life and has application throughout to humans throughout their lifespan. So our Montessori trainings that focus on the preparation of the adult for their work with children and adolescents and elders, this very preparation for the practice of education as an aid to life impacts the lives of adults in deeply meaningful ways. And all of us who've undergone this training have experienced this, and we talk about our training being transformative. But over the last several years, as Helen and I have been working with women at the grassroots level through the ESF community-rooted education approach, that work has really brought into sharp focus for us that impact that this training has on the lives of women, helping them find their voice, overcome the social strictures, and the consequent ripple effects on their communities. So as you were talking about women's emancipation becoming a tool for changes in the social structure, there was so much of all of this that will resonate in the stories that Helen is going to share some of the observations from the field now, and then we will go on to sort of discussing aspects of our Montessori's philosophy and practice. Again, what we have found is exactly what you said, that the theory and practice were just inform one another, even in this work that we have, as we see in catalyzing these changes. So, Helen.
Yes, Uma. Thank you. Hi, everybody. Yeah, the Montessori approach to education as an aid to life is where I want to begin. is in a true sense, has aided me in my life 26 years ago. I did not know then that I needed help and that I was trapped in many, many fears. And I also did not know then that I had the potential within me to overcome all of them and grow above all fears. It's not all over. I continue to work till date. This profound perspective boosted my confidence and helped me find myself and find my place in the society. This new perspective helped me find my role and my cosmic task and became an agent for social change in the communities that I was associated with. And the joy of life lived meaningfully and the purposeful task of supporting children in their development constantly pushed me against all odds to reach out to people and share this newfound perspective only because I enjoyed the liberated ideas of life and its development. I thought that there must be many more women like me that existed who did not understand or did not know that something like this exists. The idea of the potential for lifelong growth and development and the understanding of the existence of human tendencies. And that this is, and all of this, what I'm saying just now, that it was not created or invented, but it was a way of life that was discovered. You know, from 1999 onwards, from the year I was introduced to Montessori, day after day, year after year, situation after situation, I grew stronger and stronger from within. And I always thought this happened only to me because I had no understanding or knowledge of any other education system or of any philosophy or principles because I started from nothing. I had no work experience with children, school, or any other thing. But then many years later, after all the experiences that I personally had and cherished and enjoyed, many years later, I met a bunch of women who were already working with children and women. They were working with children, women, and they were involved in communities. They were the Anganwadi workers.
So just to give a brief context, every village in India has one or more early childhood care and education centers, and these are called Anganwadis. And these are staffed by women from the community who have given some training, and their work is to support the women in their village through pregnancy and to help them and support them and the children through their first 5 years of their lives of their children.
Yeah, and the women in the Anganwadis are powerful in the communities, for they are in charge of supplying food, medical supplies, and keep track of the children by doing census and education and all of these. These women experience the same kind of liberated feeling during the core training. Core training is the community-rooted education, which is an AMI-ESF initiative. They expressed it in many ways. They verbalized it with joyful tears. Some of them just changed their way of life. Some of them fought for the rights of the children. All of them became agents of change, first within themselves, and then extended it to others. Once again, I relived my own past experiences of joy and power, yet again through these women. And the first thing we saw with them was the inner transformation. You know, initially when they started attending the training, they were reluctant to come every day to class. They had hundreds of excuses each time of why they're not coming, why they don't want to come, and not coming on time. They thought it was yet another boring training, all stemming from their past experiences of the various trainings that they underwent. But this changed. They fought against their own mindset, their families, the distance that they were traveling to reach the center. They made sure to keep the dates of the training free of any other allotted work because these Anganwadi teachers are given lots of assignment by the government. So that was one of the excuses for them not to come. But then they made sure that coming to the training was their priority. That changed because they changed from within. Once they were transformed from within, they transformed the environment for the children. They understood the child, their tasks, the powers, and their potential, and that it was their role to prepare the environment, support and nurture the children. They changed the whole dynamics. They protected and safeguarded the children with their work, with concentration. You know, earlier, whenever the officials came, they were given the center place in the classrooms, in the centers. But soon things changed. They showed that the work of the children was important. They stopped the government officials from entering the center, from disturbing. Once they understood the importance of the material, they didn't wait for anybody to come and supply material for them. They made material with the waste that they had. After understanding the importance of toilet and toilet training for children and the good it did to them, they didn't wait for the government to come and build toilets. They went around in the community, wherever buildings were made, they gathered the raw material and made toilets for themselves, for the children. Whatever was happening there in the centers, they soon became the agents of change in the community. The work and practice reached homes. Seeing the changes happening with the children, families came forward to support the center. When the centers were not functioning, like in the night or during holidays, there were other people who used the place and messed it up. So the families guarded the center against the trespassers at night and during holidays. They created gardens and maintained them. The families did that. Some of it, I mean, all these practices, whatever they were doing, through their earlier practices, from the trainings that they had, they knew some of it, or most of it rather, but they didn't know how to implement it. Like, for example, they all knew how important cleanliness was. But all they did about cleanliness was they sang songs every morning, narrated stories, they read things from the chart of how important cleanliness is. But now they were able to set up the place to implement this understanding and also knew how to connect the children to the material and the environment that they prepared. They were able to do all of this and many more. They felt empowered to stand up for themselves and for the women and children with proper understanding and knowledge. These women had less exposure to city life or other practices or other philosophies. So we think, we assume and think that it is the training that they went through has empowered them. This kind of observation didn't stop here. We saw yet another group of women, and this time from affluent families, not from the village, from the city. This time they were highly educated, greatly influenced by media, technology, and science. They were feeling empowered with the change, but we saw them change and feel empowered with the change in their perspective during the training.
So this is a group of people that was located in a school in a large city. It was a large school, a well-established school, and their early childhood section was serving over 350 children. And these were women who were qualified, who were working as teachers in that institution.
Yes, as Uma says, they were qualified. They were financially sound from middle class. They were all middle class women, unlike the earlier women. They landed here because it was different. The school was different. It was beautifully located amidst nature, well-planned infrastructure with fully equipped, fully set up material. But they were all here. Most of them were here. This was an escape from home for them, from the pressures of culturally infused lifestyles. They were not able to come here. They were all, they all were able to take up teaching as a profession because teaching job was accepted by the families. Just like during Montessori's time. For whatever reason they landed, they were here, but they did not enjoy work. They did not take ownership of the children and their development. They were not ready to talk to parents or commit to anything. And it's not just them, even the organization and other members also did not appreciate these people and these women and value their work. There was lack of understanding from both sides. Again, after we started this training, we saw a huge shift in the way their perspectives changed. And again, what we saw was the inner transformation. Just like the Anganwadi women, it was the spiritual preparation of these women, conviction in their capacity, awareness of self-worth, understanding of the children and their powers, conviction in the method. All of this leading to this inner transformation, which further led to confidence. This shift in the perspective, this confidence led to spontaneous interest in work. You know, these women who were coming there with disinterest, suddenly found interest, started showing interest in work. They took ownership. They understood that they were part of this interdependent whole, that they were an important contributing member of this community, which was otherwise not expressed or appreciated or shown or realized. But slowly they started understanding that they were responsible for supporting child in the vital task of self-construction. And this not only got them interested in the work that they were doing, but it also got them motivated to move forward. Initially, these women were very reluctant. They were not at all ready to stay even for 5 minutes. If the cutoff time was 2:30, by 2:25, they'll start winding up, and 2:30, they'll just disappear. That was the kind of commitment they had, or maybe pressure from home. But then this changed. This changed into not only staying for extended time, but now they want to take up diploma programs and they want to grow beyond work here for extended period and also become trainers. That's what they're all dreaming now. Even the principal of the school now feels empowered to talk to the parents and is confident in the work that these people are all doing. She is now firm. Earlier, she used to give in to the parents' requests and keep changing everything. But now she doesn't give in to, because she's also standing up and fighting and talking to the parents and staying committed. They are all ready now to work as a team and they are respecting each other's work. They see the value of the system and feel very special to be part of it. What started as an escape from home has now become a passion. And they feel empowered and confident to follow their heart's desires while still fulfilling all their responsibilities at home and all other relationships. Earlier, multitasking was a struggle. Now it is a choice. What we saw with the other two groups of women, we saw the same kind of feeling powerful and feeling empowered with another group of women from the hills of Kodaikanal. They expressed their newfound power in different ways after being introduced to the Montessori philosophy.
So many of you will be familiar with the term name Kodaikanal. That was where Montessori spent much of her time, part of her time while she was in India. And in these beautiful hills, it's a hill country, and it's a rural community, quite remote from cities. And the women who came to this training were working in schools primarily run by NGOs or charities or missionary organizations. So they were already working with children and doing serving the community on some level. Yes.
Yeah. And not just that, they were also interested in whatever work they were doing with children. They were invested. They were passionate. And of course, they learned more to be better equipped to support children. Along with all other changes that we observed in the other two settings, we also saw something very striking. The most striking realization was the awareness that everyone, regardless of age, needs to be independent. That's what they realized. Culturally, in these places, I don't know if it's across the globe, but women are expected to serve food, wind up after eating, literally do everything, literally do all the activities and answer to the basic needs, like provide hot water for bath, provide all the supplies needed. They saw value in helping a 2.5-year-old become functionally independent. And they understood and realized the effects it has on the overall development. And this realization and understanding, they extended to their homes. They started organizing their homes for all ages to live independently, including their in-laws, husband, grown-up children. Though this was not a welcome change in the homes, people were offended. They said, for the last 26, 27 years, you were different. What happened to you suddenly that you want to change? Those were the kinds of arguments they had at home. There was unrest. It looked scary because this was not a welcome change in the homes. But the women were convinced in what they were doing. Their joy in doing all of that, the liberated feeling, and the extra time they got to do their own work for themselves got them to enjoy this new understanding. The first thing that was noticed in all of the women so far that we heard was confidence. What is it in the Montessori approach that helps this happen? I think we all should think about it. I don't know. This is what we thought. It looks like in learning to free the child's potential, they seem to free themselves to realize their own potential, the potential for lifelong growth and development. All of them began to articulate the attitudes, values, and perceptions that define their place in the community.
As you were sharing the stories, Helen, I was thinking of Erica sharing Montessori's term of new women. And literally we saw, that is what we observed happening, that these were new women. They approached life differently. And although we entered these communities really thinking about shifting the life of children in these communities, right? But what followed was this, what we realized was a startling effect on the women themselves and the structural changes that were happening in the communities. Coming back to, again, what Erica shared, that education leading to structural and social reform. We saw that happening so spontaneously in these settings, I'm sure all of you have experienced this both personally and others on whom this training has touched people that you've observed that these changes happening in them. But this impact of women, it is really, we experienced it in a heightened way in the core approach, maybe because we were embedded in one community. It's a concentrated, focused time that we spend, and it's a concentrated group of women in one area. And we could see this in a very different way than I've ever observed in my other trainings, where we see changes in people, but the impact on the community was not so clear to me as so dramatic as that we observed in this core work. We saw it even in South Africa, where we facilitated, and I know Jen Moore, you're here, and you have shared the impact this core training has had on the practitioners in the communities, again at the grassroots level, in doing the work with children, rippling out into their families and communities that they serve. But what we did observe closer at hand was the work with the Montessori trained adults who were facilitating the work of these practitioners. They realized the impact of Montessori and the understanding of education as an aid to life was so much more deepened by by their experience of this core with the practitioners at the grassroots level. So, as I said, we conceived of core as when we conceived of core, our focus was to work with communities to make a change for the children. And the impact on the women and the ripple effect in the community was really a startling byproduct. And it has brought home to us the truth of Montessori's advice that if we touch the lives of children, we will touch everything else. Right? So, and so we have been reflecting on our training to identify the aspects that support this change. And Helen has been looking at, there's not been much studies on the impact of Montessori training on adults. So Helen has been looking at some of the studies of that on women's empowerments. And so Helen, do you want to share some insights?
Yes, yeah, Uma. There have been lots of definitions, but one definition that an expert in this field has said, they say, empowerment is the process of increasing the capacity of individuals or groups to make choices and to transform those choices into desired actions and outcomes. Empowerment of women means developing them as more aware individuals who are politically active, economically productive, and independent, and are able to make intelligent decisions in matters that affected them. And this is what we have been seeing happening with all the women that we heard about so far. All of them were salaried women. But we see that just economic independence alone could not empower them. Most of them were educated, but just not education alone is enough to empower them. And all this, I'm not saying it's all from the studies. Researchers have found that anything alone cannot empower. And empowerment, another person says, empowerment is an active, multi-dimensional process which enables women to realize their full identity and power in all spheres of life. And power is not a commodity to be transacted, nor can it be given away as aims. Power has to be acquired, and once acquired, it needs to be exercised, sustained, and preserved. And this is what we thought the beauty of the Montessori training is. Whatever they get to see, hear, and practice, they get to exercise it. Because women are amidst children, women are in the company of all kinds of relationships and people. They have to work to maintain the relationship. They have to implement all that they are learning, all that they are practicing. And it's not as if somebody gives it to them and they use it and it's gone. Once they have done it, they have to continuously do it. So they have to sustain it and preserve this power that they have got, because they have to continue nurturing the relationship that they have created.
Yeah, so as they work, go on.
And so this is an ability to act with agency in their lives. And this agency comes through this inner transformation that we saw happening with all the women. And what we saw, the rest of it just fell in place. Sorry, Uma.
So we were just having a conversation. So what is it about in our courses that creates a belief in an understanding of their value, that supports this valorization, that gives the capacity to act on their belief and their understanding? So in reflecting on aspects of our philosophy and approach, we can identify certain things. As Helen said, they're working with children, and as they work with children, as they realize the child's work as that of creative self-construction, they didn't stop there. They extrapolated this to understand the power that humans have for lifelong creative self-realization, their potential for their own continued evolution, the realization of their own potential. So it's not as though they saw that, oh, this is for the child, because they immediately took it, we can do it too. We also have this power. We have these tendencies, and we can use it, and we can realize our potential more fully. Right? In supporting the child's development of independence, they realized their own agency and ways in which they could foster it their own independence, in their own lives, as Helen shared the story, and in the lives of the families and the family members. And in recognizing how each child is part of an interdependent community, how every child makes a difference to the community in which they live, they recognized that this was also true for themselves. The work they were doing was critical. It was making a difference to their community. And again, in learning to free that child's potential, the women themselves found their own freedom. There was a profound change in their perspective that triggered the capacity to think and act and choose with agency. Yeah, and they exercise this power daily. So, Helen, you had some great stories about of some examples of this.
Yeah. So I believe in one of the Anganwadis in up north, they got to understand that spinach is very important and it's a good source of iron and vitamins for children. And so the government was supplying for some time, and after that they stopped. So these women started growing spinach in their small kitchen garden. And slowly, that also they couldn't for various reasons. But since they understood that this is important, they made it a point to grow them in spite of all odds. I believe for a very, very long distance, they didn't find open land. So they had to walk, they had to go, but they gathered all the mothers and they were able to convince the mothers of the importance of this spinach. So they all walked miles together to that spot wherever there was land and water available. They grew spinach and they made sure that it was available for children in their meals on a daily basis. So once that understanding is there, the power automatically comes. And that's what I told, they are capable of exercising. They are capable of sustaining that implementation and knowledge and understanding that they have and preserve it also. That's the kind of empowerment that we saw, happening in women, just like that. Once they were convinced that this kind of work is important for children, this protection is important, this kind of environment was important, they fought all odds and ensured. And coming back to our today's topic, why do we talk about women's empowerment? And why are we celebrating Women's Day? That's because society and the world all over sees women as weak and powerless and sees women's work as being of little or no value. And they suppress. So the women are suppressed. So, and we all know that, women in specific have multiple roles to play. She's a daughter, a sister, a wife, a mother, daughter-in-law, sister-in-law, along with the professional work that they have. And not just that, she's expected to play each of these roles to a fullest capacity. And so increasing the capacity to make intelligent decision is important. And that's why that empowerment. It is not only about gaining capacity, but it is also about realizing the power to utilize the capacity in all dimensions of her life. And so empowerment is first and foremost about power. Changing power relations in favor of those who previously, this again is a quote. They're saying it's the change in the power relations. For whom? For who previously exercised little power over their own lives. And so they need to be empowered. And that's why we're talking about women being empowered. And this is not by nature that women are without power and that they need to gain power. It is their birthright. But it is by culture that they are in a situation that they do not exercise their power. Hence, women are considered as weaker section. And so that's a practice that she's protected by the father in childhood, by the husband in her adulthood, and by son in her old age. And what happens if women don't have any of these? So women need to gain power and control over their own lives to live in accordance to their own desires. And such a woman is said to be empowered. Because we all know women need nurture and relationships. They create and nurture relationships. And that's essential for the community. And so transforming women, we touch all parts of the community to bring about a social change. And for this, she needs to be changed. For anybody for that matter, women or whoever, but here in specific, she can only give what she has. And if she has to give everything to that relationship, she has to change and become powerful.
Speaking in India, Dr. Montessori said, to weave the cloth for society, we find ourselves in great need of special threads. Here we see the importance of the mother as she is the spinner of life, the one who gives the first twist to the flax as the thread is made for the cloth that is society. As Erica said, Montessori saw women and children as a unit. She saw women as fundamental agents and necessary for social change, to act with authority in society and in their own life. So women's emancipation leads to children's emancipation and structural changes in society. So, this idea that the practical and the as you saw in all of these examples, it was a very practical approach that led to this fundamental change, that led to this thing. So coming back to your question, Erica, did Montessori's feminism stop in 1908? And I would agree with you. No way. I think Montessori education as an aid to life helps women gain a fresh perspectives on themselves and their role in society. It helps them become catalysts for social change in their communities. So as we celebrate Women's Day, let us celebrate the enduring power of Montessori's work in helping women find their voice and realize the strength of their contributions to society.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Uma and Helen, for this very inspiring and personal insights into your work. And thank you, of course, Erica. I will just read some questions. So it seems, Erica, it seems people in the chat are interested maybe in how might Montessori's approach to education as an aid to life or her pedagogy reflect her early feminist foundations?
I feel it's a very broad question, and I mean it's mainly what Uma and Helen have been discussing for the past 30 minutes. It's the integration of the role of women within thinking of the child not as something separable from. And the work that has been done, I think, recently in connecting, the mother from conception to, to Montessori structures as well as the family. I think it's how we can deeply see how the child is not a single unit; it's connected to. It's a large question. So if Uma and Ellen want to chime in, I would be. I'm appreciative. I'll be appreciative of that.
Can you repeat that question, Ren, again?
Yeah, so how might Montessori's approach to education as an aid to life reflect her early feminist foundations?
I think it's exactly what we were talking about. Like, it is so integrated, as Erica said. It was her view of life and society. It was not separated, so she did not let that go. And although she started with the child, I think it would really. Most of Montessori's trainings were full of women, and she spoke to women. And she carried on that work of helping women. I know she worked in the College of Hygiene, helping women to understand their bodies and take control of their own, their biological. What did she call it, Erica? The biological aspects of her thing, that
the biological work. Yeah.
That the biological work, right? So that's this social victory that as she spread, mothers are going to help in the spinning of this flax. So she really talked to the women over and over again, you are going to make a difference. you are this thing. So it's fundamentally what we do as education, as an aid to life, if we come back to this understanding of the realization of human potential and help people in the training to understand that what our training does is help individuals realize their own potential. And it's only by freeing people in themselves as individuals that they can, as Helen said, you cannot take to your practice what you don't have. If you have not freed yourself, how can you free the child? So that's the essence of what we do in our work as training in the preparation of the adults, is to help individuals free themselves. And then they are able to do this. Helen, would you agree that this is what you were saying, that you cannot take something?
Yes, Suma, and this phrase aid to life, aiding life wherever, whichever age, with whatever situation. That's another thing I would like to add actually to it. Education as aid to life and not separating it from life itself.
Thank you so much. And another question, also from the chat, I think this is also related to the question I asked. The question from Alison says, not everyone who works with children in just any environment seems to undergo such empowering transformations. It's not just about working with children. So what do you think is special or specific about a Montessori environment that seems to induce such transformation in the adults?
I would say the prepared environment that creates the conditions of freedom that can, that again, I think we have addressed this idea that, you free. It's that freedom. It's not an environment that is focused on the delivery of a curriculum or to mold people. It is really about helping. It's a revelatory practice, right? I'm revealing the potential of each one. I'm revealing my own potential in that whole thing. So it's not a formative work that we do. It's a revelatory work that we do. And so in helping the children realize and reveal their own potential, Montessori talks about removing the gem that is already there. You're just removing all the extraneous stuff. So that's the same thing that happens over here. It's a revelatory work that we do. And so we have to, and that is what is so fundamentally different in Montessori environments. We are not trying to mold and form in the restricted image of what we have. So when we free, then it really becomes so much more than we can even conceive of in our limited experience.
Yeah, and it's not just about the material or about how to set it up, but it's about the understanding of what this child needs. Whoever, again, it's not just the child, any human being. What is the need of this human being? How can this human live life free with, following the biological need from within? And only with that understanding, only when that understanding is there, will that adult be able to prepare such an environment or prepare and support and nurture such beings. So not everybody, if I have understood the question right, not everybody understands that. True. Such a transformed, someone with that inner transformation can only, support, create, prepare, and nurture.
If I may add just a teeny tiny thing, there's a big discrepancy between the way Montessori describes the child and a lot of other contemporaries of Montessori describe the child. So as I was reading her work and reading that of other educators at the time, I was struck by I see it as a deep respect. And it's a fascinating, it was a surprising and fascinating discovery at the time. And I saw it in the classroom when I did observation, and it's a practice that I try to have myself as a teacher in the classroom, like sort of the deep respect for the learning process as well as for each individual, it's not something to be taken for granted at the turn of the 20th century in Italy when you read pedagogical treatises about the child.
One more question, Helen. Everyone seems to really like your definition, the definition you said about empowerment. And in it, you say that power needs to be exercised. And you gave some examples about how women were exercising their power in their homes. One question we had is, how do the men view this? How accepting are they? And how do the women continue to exercise that power?
Don't know. In my experience, I don't think all men appreciate and enjoy that. Maybe some do, but that's what I said, against all odds. When I said against all odds, not just men, any elders also in the family don't appreciate if they see, some change in practice, change in the way you look at things, change in the perspective. It's not a welcome change. But then if there's conviction, this person will be able to prove, will be able to convince, bring about this conviction what she has in everybody else, in the others also. They'll be able to convince and help them see the better part of it. Like there was a lady who said, with this independence, doing things independently, I believe the mother-in-law, she had to open the bottle to drink water or peel the banana. The son insisted, that's the husband, insisted that she do that every single day for the mother-in-law. But then when she realized how important pincer movement was for the connection of the brain and how important it was for her to open the bottles for her own well-being, though they were fight at home, though the husband didn't look at it in good spirit and good light, she continued. She stood by what she thought was good for the mother-in-law, and she continued doing just out of love and respect and conviction in what she was doing. And slowly, when things changed, the mother-in-law's coordination improved, her health improved, then the husband saw, but that took a long time. But then she stayed put because she was convinced. Again, coming back to that inner transformation. It cannot be externally given or externally forced upon. It has to come from within. As I told, this women stopped supplying water and food in their homes. There was unrest, there was fight. And I started worrying. I felt as if I was the cause for that fight at home and that unrest at home. But the women said, no, we see value in how important independence is. When a 2-year-old can do, why not a 40-year? Why not? And she said, I feel ashamed of myself. I'm doing things for my 17-year-old son, 17-year-old children. So men didn't, for some, they didn't initially appreciate, but later, yes. But some continued and finished life also just like that.
I would, and yeah, there's a little personal note there, but I would like to pick up on this that somebody has written about love, right, and the power of love. But I would like to qualify this with using a phrase that Mr. Yosten, who worked in India for a long time, used. He called it intelligent love. So it's not that these women did not love before, but now that love was educated and they were doing what they knew was going to really serve the needs of the people they were serving. It was not a blind love, right? So that is what this offers, an education of love. And so it becomes an intelligent expression of love. And yeah, so I think that's what we offer through our course. So it's not just love, because everyone says, I love the children, and we smother them in the process, right? So it's not lack of love, it's lack of education of love.
Thank you. These are really great answers. Thank you so much for all these great examples and answers. And thank you everyone for joining and participating in this talk.